Welcome to Raw Painting. In this video series, we're just going to be painting miniatures. You're going to get a bird's eye view of me just painting miniatures. It's raw, uncut. We're going to post it as it's recorded, so there's never any telling what's going to be said. If you like watching miniatures being painted, if you've got tips, tricks you want to pick up, if you want to add any content in the comments below, I'll be happy to reply to them. And let's just jump in and paint some miniatures. All right, getting back to painting our Reaper Frost Giant Warrior. We're getting really close. I anticipate 2 more videos. We're going to work on the helmet proper and then the horns. I'm going to split it up into 2 videos, I think, so that we can really focus on those 2 parts. But after that, then we'll just have to base him and he's going to be done. Getting very close. Of course, while we're basing, we're going to be painting a different miniature. And I have chosen Blightfang the Dragon. So space-wise, with my setup here, it'll be hard to see. But that is Blightfang the Dragon. He's so big he's knocking over my Sophie. We're going to make him a white dragon. And I'll have to work on a setup for when I go to paint him just for size. So compared to even the Frost Giant, which is big, and when you compare this miniature to a standard, we'll use Jaw for an example. I mean, just a massive scaled mini. The dragon dwarfs him. So it's going to be fun to paint. And I hope you follow along as we continue the raw painting. For this Frost Giant, we're just going to start laying in some paint. Got a little bit of build up on my brush. Knock it down a little bit. And here you can definitely see some of the mold lines that I did not do a good enough job cleaning up. I had hoped I did a decent job, but I'm seeing a couple on that helmet. You know, if this were a commission, of course I would go in and clean those up and then re-primer. But because this is for my own tabletop game, I'm not going to. And I'm just going to lay down a base coat. This video is going to air just after Christmas. So I hope you had happy holidays. Hope you got to spend it with friends and families that you love, even if you have to do it virtually. A little bit of a challenging angle there with between the horn and my camera setup. Just a little bit of a funky angle. We're still playing with a lot of different trial and error camera setups. So I appreciate your patience as we find the one that works the best for everybody. For everybody that's watching as well as me who's painting. So this Frost Giant as we've said in previous ones, has got a lot of like Nordic callouts. Really debated on how to handle the helmet, what colors to paint, and if it was going to be like a mismatched piece from the armor, or like just collected along the way from the giant going to Viking. But I decided I'm going to keep it in the same color palette as the armor. So process-wise and paint colors, it's going to be the same. I may have to change my camera angle here just a little bit for the light, just because I have a feeling that's not centering for viewing. And the light for me painting is a little bit off. So we may make some quick adjustments in the camera, which means you may have to stomach a little bit of movement and possibly even my ugly mug just for a moment. But I want to get this base coat laid down first before I do anything. And then I'll play with the camera angles. So my thoughts are I'm going to do that back shield and the kind of sunken parts on the helmet in the grays that match the armored skirt, and then the trim parts I'm going to do in gold to match the decorative bits on that armored skirt. And so I don't know, I may do a different challenging, knock down my Reaper. Yeah, I think that might be good. I'm not positive yet. Let's go ahead and make a couple of quick adjustments here with the light. Like I said, this is more for me. Yeah, better. I want that light a little more centered above. So do we do that in a brighter silver? Maybe I should have done a pole. Nope, we'll stick with the plan. Stick with the plan. That way I don't have to change things around at the last minute. And as we've said before, that light source, boy, that's not quite the contrast I wanted. We'll let this dry up first and then take a peek, but may have to go back through and blend this down a little bit to see how much contrast that has from the previous layer. I think that might be too light of a color. Regardless, we're going to lay it down, and then we may have to go back through and tone it down. We'll give it just a minute, but I think that may be too light. Guess it's not blending too bad. It's drying fairly fast, of course, doing nice thin layers. That's the ticket and the key. Nice thin layers. Now let's go ahead and just keep proceeding with this and see how we do. Of course, this helmet has some like scarring and battle damage. We're going to try to keep that in place so that we've got those contrasting divots that really pop out. No, that's not too bad if you're looking at that dried side. A little bit more of a transition than I hoped for, but we can go in and lay down just a little bit more gradients. Bring that together a little bit more. From that deepest gray up into the lighter gray. That'll help blend those in a little bit better. And we'll do the same on this side here. Just marry those two up a little bit more. A little bit better for the tone. And then just continue blending from one shade to the next. Still excited to get this mini complete. The dragon is going to be fun to do. It's definitely going to be a challenge. But it's a great sculpt and actually behind the timeline that I wanted to do. I believe I've said how I wanted to do that one for an in-person game and just was not able to get it painted and done before the players went to the area where they would have encountered it. But that's okay. Theater of the mind works too. And players in that campaign are great at that. Give them some good details and they can run with it. The last gaming session with that group, they ended up fighting a bunch of vampires and tying into one of the characters' backstories a little bit. It was a lot of fun. They threw me for a loop with some of the things that they had done in preparation for the confrontation. So it was a lot of fun. The challenge for DMs oftentimes is that players can surprise you with some of the things they pull out of their hats. And not me, I always like it. I think it's great for a couple of reasons. One, it shows that they've got interest in your games. And two, it allows you to make anticipations on some of their actions going forward. So it can be a lot of fun. And just going through and laying some of those same colors on this back shield. And you'll notice I am not letting these thin layers completely dry, and that is so I can do some wet blending. I want these to run together a little bit. Because I'm using nice thin layers, those layers below it kind of shine through or poke through a little bit, which is great. That's what I want. And then with a cleaner brush, just blend those layers together a little bit on the edges. That's the wet blending. And that just helps knock down some of those transitions to make the smoother lines. Of course, I kind of stipple those edges that I'm painting there. I don't know how well that shows up in the camera, but like I've said in previous, that just helps break up that color a little bit. So it's kind of like camouflage, like digital print camouflage, which works really well. And on this shield part, I'm going to start drawing out the edges a little bit. Hopefully that'll help give that illusion a little bit more of form. I want this to feel a little thinner than what it is, or curved, I guess, on that outer lip and the inner lip, so that we want it to make a more like cupped shape on there. which you can see it's sculpted in there a little bit, but we really want to highlight that out. And when you compare that to the horns in that center section, you're going to start seeing some of those highlights popping through there. And that last layer was nice and thin. So it's drying pretty good and fast, which we like, because then we can go in and paint a little more, smaller and smaller bits. Only covering about, oh, I don't know, between 2/3 and 3/4 of what we did on the last layer. Because we don't want it to be shining armor. A little bit more of that darker gray will shine through. Now, if you remember what we did on the skirted armor, this is where it gets a little more challenging, because we're going through and brushing in a heavy wash of dark gray. Now this is going to settle into the crevices, the cracks, the sculpted battle damage, the little nooks. Oh, there goes the heater. I hope that doesn't annoy you too much. I apologize. But it is winter time. And here you'll see with this shading, as I bring it around this end, I'm not going to fully lay in on the top or the center. Again, this is to give depth. Because it is a wash layer, it's going to be still fairly thin, but I'm putting it on heavy because I really want it to sit over the previous highlight layers in depth. And then as we do those thinner transitional colors of the highlights, when we continue to highlight that helmet piece up, the darker areas are really going to stay much darker. Now that piece there will take a little bit longer to dry out. It really gives the definition from that center piece and those bits holding the horns in place. And that back strip, which is also going to be gold to match that rim. Maybe, I don't know, now I'm second guessing myself on that. So there isn't a lot of break from that to the piece that goes above. I mean, a little bit, but not a clear defined line. So yeah, we're going to keep that gold. That'll go up into those eyepieces. Now, while we've got it at this good angle here, I see a little spot right in here where we've got just too thin a paint. That skin color was just shining through a little too much for me. I'm gonna go in and clean these lines up a little bit. And that's drying pretty decent. Still got some wet spots, and I'm not going to touch this while it's wet. I want that to dry completely. But I don't want to take too long on this video, so I'm going to pause it. Okay, I said I wasn't going to edit anything on raw, but I didn't want everybody just to sit and watch paint dry, but now that I'm thinking about it, that may have been editing. So going forward, I will not be pausing to let paint dry. Sorry to say. Now this may seem somewhat repetitive, but we're going back through just a little bit here and laying on the colors that we previously laid down. Again, this is just to give it that start to highlight. We basically hit 3 shades of highlight before I went back through and did a dark wash. Boy, this large mini without a handle is a challenge. Normally I don't touch the minis while I'm painting them. In this case, I'm going to have to here and there, but I have already sealed them. So in between my layers, in between the videos, I seal with Testors Dull Coat. That gives it a good protection. And allows me to be able to do limited little bits of handling of the minis. Again, I'm not overly worried about this one because it is just a tabletop mini, not a commission, not a display. It's not going to be a shelf forever mini. So I'm okay with not perfect on this one. If any of you follow Reaper Miniatures, this mini is a Reaper miniature. They just put up their 2021 paint challenge. If you're into mini painting, the community at Reaper Miniatures, it's something else. I recommend you check it out. I'm just getting in on their Twitch just since ReaperCon. Prior to that, I only participated on the forums. But I'm getting more and more into their Discord and Twitch. And like I said, they just posted the 2021 Reaper challenges on the forums, on their Twitch, on their Discord, on their website, and on their Facebook page. If you want to challenge yourself with some mini paintings, check it out. They're not a sponsor. I want to make that just like abundantly clear. I know I say it a lot in a lot of my videos. It's just because if I'm going to give you advice and thoughts and opinions, I want you to know that they're not bought and paid for. They are just my thoughts and opinions on different things. And right now it's Reaper because, well, that's what we're working on. This Reaper Frost Giant. And I said I've been a fan of Reaper for a long time. They have more than earned my support and business. Fantastic community. Like I said, the community alone is just so fantastic. Everybody is really great, participates together, helps each other grow and develop as miniature painters and enthusiasts, and just top-notch people. Been really impressed with not just Reaper, but the community has been fantastic. Do a little bit of stippling at that edge there. Again, a little bit of a different camera angle. Until I post it, I won't know how it's doing. Last time I tried it a little more from the side, and after I reviewed it, I did not like it. I thought it was not all that great. So I wanted to change it and go back to kind of the bird's eye view. But the equipment that I had changed out a little bit. And so having to readjust again. And this video may be a little bit longer just because we haven't even touched the golds yet. Trying to stipple in that edge there a little bit better on that side. It was a little too drastic for me, a little too sharp of a transition. Looking for more subtlety, a little more subtlety. And with the next layer, we're going to be right back where we were prior to laying down that dark wash. if you happen to be a subscriber, make sure you leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on the video, on the progression of the Mini, what we can do to improve. Got a couple more changes yet to go. We've got some new sound equipment coming. We're hoping that really boosts the audio quality. But content-wise, sound off too, and let me know what you think. Is this something that's enjoyable? Let me know where you're viewing. If you're viewing at home, if you're viewing at work. What kind of additional content can we lay on here for you, other than just watching some paint go on? If there's anything you want to see or hear, let me know. These layers can feel a little tedious because a lot of it's the same old, but a lot of that is because we're using thinner paints. We have to apply more frequently, but those thinner paints really, really help when we start getting into stronger transitions. Because they just blend so much better. So that's where we were at prior to laying in that darker tone. And I know it doesn't look like much on camera, but when you see it in person, and especially on the shelf, it just really pops well. Oops, sorry, Sophie. That Sophie I've had for a number of years. I got it as a gift from my wife and kids. I got two of them actually. One of them is that Sophie, and then I got a Cowgirl Sophie, which I actually have painted twice before, but just such a great sculpt, I end up stripping it down and painting it again. It's actually right now stripped down and ready for new paint. Well, new primer and then paint. But I've got so much on my shelf, I have not been able to get to it. Soon I will get to it. Now here, there are a couple of like rivets or rivet heads or bolt heads on that back of the helmet. So I'm trying to now start avoiding those so that they give the kind of divoted illusion that they are pressed in the metal. And there are a couple of ways you can go about doing that. You can go back through and circle them with darker colors, but I find that very difficult to do. And because they're in the light, they're not going to be as dark. Now I'm going to change it up a little bit. We didn't do anything really with those sides. So I'm going to change that now and start adding in, because they're so much smaller than the rest of the helmet. I don't think they need a whole ton, but I am going to go in and start adding in a little bit of highlight, just so they don't look flat from where they're at. And they're not going to get the same like dark wash or anything like that, just because they're so small. But we do want them highlighted so that they show the transition to light. But I figure they're close to the face, they're under the horns, they're not going to get as much light. And here's where we start getting a little more scary, because this is where we start getting, get a real good brush wash. This is where we start getting into even brighter grays, continuing those highlights up. Now, because there's a bigger transition here, I'm going to go with an even smaller area. Again, just stippling it in. This represents the highest point on this helmet. So you want to look it over and kind of decide where those areas are going to be ahead of laying any paint down. You want to be very purposeful in the placement of this color, because even though it'll blend with the last layer we put on pretty well, this is kind of the make it or break it point. So you have to be very purposeful with the application. And just good thin layers, lay them right in. And depending on time, I'm trying to keep a watch out, but depending on time, we may break this into 3 videos. Do the gold color in a different like section, I haven't heard a lot of feedback as far as the video lengths, so make sure you sound off on that. Let me know what works the best for you. Ooh, challenging, but you can start to see that laying in pretty decent there on that shield part, that back part of the helmet. And just nice and thin back to the top. Stippling as much as we can to give a breakup. We don't want just harsh lines in the paint. We want it stippled to give it a more natural effect. because these are thinner paints, multiple coats, that gives us good coverage and really breaks up those colors. Rinse the brush as we blend these ever so much lighter. Trying to be very picky about where I lay the paint. Just thinner and thinner swaths of paint. Getting more and more direct to the high point. And like that armored skirt, we won't go to bright white. That's something I saved just for like heroic characters. So when I'm painting PCs or NPCs, I'll go through and do bright white highlights. But on these monstrous races, I avoid it for the most part. There'll be a time or two where I might change that up and just put a pop of white, but it's pretty few and far between. Now I did not forget about the side pieces, the I guess I call them cheek armor. I'm able to go back and reuse the paints that I have pre-mixed because I'm using a wet palette. So it keeps the paints nice and moist. You can go back to them and they're still great to use. Yeah, pretty good gradient there. I'm pretty happy with that for the armor. think it matches the skirt pretty decent. It may even be a little bit lighter, so I guess you could still claim that it was scavenged in a raid without it being too far-fetched. For a fantasy game with dragons and magic, I'll take it. And just like on the helmet, smaller and smaller swaths of paint in brighter and brighter colors to really add dimension and frame that face out. But I don't want it too light because that face I want to keep framed out. And I might go just a hair lighter in one little area here. Just the absolute pinnacle of this side. Now that almost looks like bright white, but I guarantee you it isn't. If you were to put this next to a figure that did have the bright whites on it, you would definitely be able to see the difference. And we'll let that dry. And then give it a little bit of an assessment. This one here seems just a little too harsh. So with my wet brush, I'm just going to diffuse it a little bit on this end. And this is actually taking some of the paint away. On the table, that's going to look pretty sweet. Pretty sweet. I'm pretty happy with that so far. Let's go and do one. Oh, sorry, Sophie. My gosh. Last little bit on the very tips of the lightest gray. Well, I guess now the second lightest gray that I have mixed. Just to give some detail highlight. And I think what we'll do now is pause the video and then come back to do the golds, which will make those grays stand out even more, just like they did on the skirt area. But so far, Reaper Frost Giant Warrior, we've got the golds on the helmet, and then the horns. We may actually do the horns first and then the gold, since those wraps on the helmet go outside of the horns. I think that may be a great idea. Oh, look at that horrible mold line that I missed on the horn. Oh, frustrating, very frustrating. But like I said, I'm going to live with it because this is just a mini for my tabletop, and I'm still happy with the progress. So I am going to change out my wet palette, and then we'll come back and paint some horns. Thanks for watching our video. We hope that you enjoyed it, and we'd love to have you subscribe. Feel free to hit that button if you care to get notifications for when we post new content. Leave your comments below and help us answer the question of where will your adventures take you. Enjoy.